So I think we'll get started. I'd like to just first start by introducing myself. I think many of you on the list know me and my colleague Edward Dai. My name is Fraser. I'm the Managing Director of China for this. My colleague in Shanghai, he runs our Shanghai and South China operations. And And we just wanted to, we wanted to put this together today. This is sort of a little bit outside of the box of what we're usually doing with our CCBC webinars, which are focused so much on business skills and being familiar with the market, and whether that's e-commerce or whether that's IP or any number of other issues. But we, we're in very uncertain and interesting times, and Edward and I have been sort of tirelessly working over the last several weeks with members on attempting to repatriate, or well, I suppose that's the wrong word, but get them back into China. And it's been a learning experience. It's been fraught with challenges, ups and downs. And the thing that we wanted to do today mostly was share our experience. The caveat here is that we're not presenting this today as necessarily a instruction manual or some sort of a fast track into China, forgive the wording, but this is really just a way for us to share what we know and what we're able to tell you with some degree of certainty, and what we're going to be able to tell you with some degree of uncertainty. And unfortunately for many of you today, it won't all be good news. But what we're going to be able to do is give you some degree of clarity. And I think that that is an important element of this that we have been missing. And I think that that goes for all of the expatriate community that I've been working with here closely, whether it's the China-Britain Business Council or the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. There are lots of organizations, JETRO, the Koreans. I mean, we're discussing with all of these organizations and trying to identify what's really going on. And what we're hoping to do today is give you a little bit of clarity, and then we'll move on to a Q&A. And again, a caveat: we don't necessarily have all the answers, but we can certainly attempt to try to pick up where some of you are leaving off with your applications or lack thereof. And with any luck, we'll be able to answer questions that are sort of broadly applicable. If you have very, very specific, case by case only questions that are not going to be necessarily beneficial to a broader swath of people, then consider asking them to us directly. We'll be sharing our email addresses at the end of this presentation. And as I've said before in some of the blog posts that I've written, don't be shy to reach out. We're certainly, and people have not been. We've been very happy to engage with a lot of people in the community. We've obviously been helping our members, but there's certain information that we can share relatively immediately. So I'll get right into this. The situation today, or the agenda, I should say, is going to include the situation today. We're going to try to clarify a little bit, what we're finding, that there's a various sort of some levels of knowledge on this topic are pretty different. Some people think that they can come back in on their tourist visas, and some people realize that the situation is a little bit more grave. We're going to talk about case studies, so some of the actual applications that we've helped shepherd to get through, some of the failures that we've had, of course, and some of the successes. Edward will offer a little bit in terms of instructions or guidance on your application should you try to re-enter China in the near future, and then we'll try to leave as much time as possible at the end for discussion and Q&A. So the situation today in China, generally speaking, is that we've, until a couple of days ago, returned to a pretty significant degree of normal. There's traffic on the streets. The business community is essentially all back in the office. We're seeing most of the metrics are stating that we're at 80% capacity. And of course, this is all within the perspective of coronavirus rather than the broader business issues that are plaguing the world today. But in terms of where we were at the end of January or the beginning of Spring Festival, and today, we've gone through a pretty incredible transformation that has now resulted in us being, to some degree or another, back where we started. Now, I'll dive into some of the basics here on this re-entry system. So China closed the borders on March 28th, as many of you know, to all non-Chinese nationals. And that means that whether you've been coming into China as a tourist, or whether you're on an M visa doing business on that 60-day, 10-year visa, or whether you're a resident and whether you live here and you have an apartment, or you have kids here that are going to school, or virtually any situation that you can identify, you're not allowed back in if you're on a foreign passport. And that's sort of the very simple reality. Now, there are loopholes. And when the government created that letter that went out on March 28th, they mentioned the availability of re-entry for necessary economic, trade, scientific, technological activities, as well as some emergency humanitarian requests. Now, that definition obviously is opaque, and it's opaque almost by definition. The reality is that Edward and I have attempted to get people into China through this caveat, and it's been successful in some ways and unsuccessful in others. So where that really is defined as an extremely senior executive at a highly invested company in China, and that might be a large oil company or a large real estate company, where there's a significant amount of tax being paid, a significant investment that's being made, or significant requirement for the continued operation of the Chinese economy. The emergency humanitarian need caveat is sort of slightly less understood. To the best of my knowledge, we haven't actually been able to get anybody back in on that particular notion yet, but it's being raised on a couple of applications that we're aware of. Now, you've probably, many of you that are watching closely, or at least are reading headlines surrounding this because you're eager to return to China, are seeing the announcement of fast lanes or green access channels, or a variety of other nomenclature that they're employing. The reality is that those are being set up primarily through the lobbying of large companies that are really in need of bringing back a huge swath of employees. And that might include a company like Daimler-Benz or Volkswagen or BASF out of Germany. These are the companies that are, requiring very, very high-end expertise and talent that return to China, that return to their home countries, and they need to get them back into China relatively as soon as possible for continued operation of that business. And of course, that business is key to the growing Chinese consumer market and that economy. So those fast lanes have been established to an extent. You've also probably been hearing about charter flights. And what that means essentially is that a given country has been allowed a single or a case-by-case basis of a charter flight where they have managed to get a critical mass of people, say it's 200 or 250 people from one particular place, that all managed to meet those criteria that I was mentioning earlier for that special single entry visa. So they've managed to get 250 people together that actually meet the criteria of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for returning to China, which means that their local district government has approved them for return based on their skill set or their seniority level or their special request from their companies that are highly invested or paying a lot of taxes in China. And I know that that sounds probably a little bit simplistic, but it is actually that simple. Now, these fast lanes are only really of value to the particular countries and companies that have managed to get one opened up. The fast lanes are less nationally oriented than they are sort of corporately, as I understand it. There have been a lot of fast lanes announced, and then it's taken several weeks longer for these organizations to actually manage to get people on the ground here. So the Germans have now landed 2 or 3 flights, I believe 2, that were, one was into Tianjin and one was into Beijing, or Shanghai, pardon me. They had planned to have them here like 3 weeks earlier. It took a long time to get 250 people's approval letters and invitation letters through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Several people were denied at the last minute. They were unable to join the group. And the price point on those flights was roughly 2,500 euros per person. Even though those flights were chartered, they were still extremely expensive. So let's say that we managed to get you a visa invitation letter. And Edward is going to talk through a little bit about that in a moment, but reminder that that's sort of this first step, is that you're trying to get a visa invitation letter from your local district government, and Edward's going to talk through some of the complex steps surrounding that. The challenges that we've encountered have been beyond that. So even though getting a visa invitation letter is a great start, that's really kind of just step one of three. You have to take this visa invitation letter to your local consulate. The Chinese consulate, wherever you are, ultimately also has some degree of discretion on whether or not they issue that visa. And we've had a very, very official high-level visa invitation letter issued, only to find that the consulate in Canada, I won't name which one, but the consulate in Canada denied the visa issuance for several weeks, 3 weeks, before we finally got them on the connected to the issuing authority in China, where there was a bit of a tit for tat, and there was some discussion, and it wasn't a very pleasant conversation from what I understand, but eventually that visa was issued. The next step, of course, is that once these single entry 30-day visas were issued into the passports of this family, they were faced with the reality of flights. And what we have right now is about 100,000 Chinese nationals in Canada that are all trying to return to China. And those national passports are going to get priority on virtually every flight, because they're not going to start issuing visas here until they feel like that critical mass of Chinese nationals has actually made it back. So air inventory is extremely thin. I know a lot of you are shopping, and you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but as we're understanding it, there are people that are shopping and finding that there are no flights. Even July is a no-go. There are people seeing that there are flights in September that are still extremely expensive, and they won't be able to get on. Edward was telling me a story yesterday where he heard about a flight returning from Vancouver where the individual paid over 11,000 Canadian dollars for a one-way economy ticket to get back to China. Obviously, if you've got a very happy and willing employer that's trying to get you back here, that can be the way to do it. But for most individuals, that's a pretty challenging nut, right? So keep in mind also that when you do arrive back in China, you're going to have to abide by all the local rules and regulations that have been stipulated by the authorities here. So that can mean quarantine. Obviously, there's coronavirus tests involved, and we can get into the details of that if necessary, but the quarantine is the main financial outlay, and that is borne by the traveler. It is, to this day, it is still considered to be 2 weeks. So you will be placed in a hotel generally by in the local area where you arrive, and you will be effectively in lockdown in that hotel for 2 weeks at your cost. And it's difficult to predict how much that per night cost is going to be. We've heard anything between 500 and 900 RMB a night. So, between 100 and 200 bucks a night, roughly, for 2 weeks. And, limited availability of food to be ordered, and, quality of internet and all those types of things have been called into question over the conversations that we've had. There are reasons that this has really been so difficult. And if you think about it from the perspective of the Chinese officials, what is really in it for them to start allowing new cases or new potential cases of coronavirus back into the country, right? This is sort of an unpopular opinion, and it might not be something that a lot of you want to hear, but there's no real impetus for a local official unless this person is extremely well connected and extremely contributing, pardon my French, but contributing very, very, very directly to the local economy. There isn't that much, in it for them to put their stamp on an invitation letter and risk a potential imported case. That's what they're calling them these days here in China, is that virtually every case of the virus is imported. They seem to believe that they have completely locked the virus down here domestically, outside of those travelers that are coming from abroad and potentially bringing back cases of COVID-19. So that brings me to this last point that developed over the weekend at Xinfandi Market. Shanghai market is twice the size or 1.5 times the size of the Forbidden City complex. And if any of you have been to Beijing as tourists, you probably realize just how big that actually is. It's several football fields is an understatement. This is a massive market. It services most of northern and eastern China in terms of all kinds of raw meat and vegetables. It's difficult to overstate the size of this place and the volume of people that go through it every day. That spike over the weekend that was supposed to have come from Xinfandi market, the story is now that it was found on a cutting board used to cut imported salmon. You know, they're trying to drag down or get down to patient zero and figure out, you know, exactly who has been where, and they're doing a pretty incredible job of it, I must admit. There are thousands of people that are being tested right now, but even myself in Beijing, I've been advised by several people, not by the government yet, but by several people that have knowledge of the situation, not to travel outside of Beijing at this time. Shanghai hotels are saying that if you are arriving from Beijing, you may not be admitted. Obviously there's some degree of trickle down on the policy, but nobody wants a new case in their district. And again, that brings me back to that local official's perspective, where, as you can imagine, there's a lot to be lost. There's a lot at risk for any local official if there is a new case in their district. So I'm going to give my voice a rest here. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Edward, who's going to talk through some of our shared experiences at a little bit more of a granular level, and then give a little bit of an idea of what it takes to get this special invitation letter for a single entry visa. So Edward, over to you.
Thank you, Noah. Good evening, everybody. Now, thank you so much for taking time to participate in this group discussion. Well, I understand it's late in Canada. We appreciate your flexibility on timing. Now, as you probably know, there's been a widespread discussion on how to return after the Ministry of Foreign Affairs made an announcement on March 26th, and the border closed on 2 days later. Now, we've been communicating with the Chinese stakeholders and the government stakeholders, including the embassy in Ottawa, consulates general, Foreign Affairs Office, Commission of Commerce, for the past several months, in the aim of working out or hashing out a good solution to Canadians' return. Now, fortunately, we have been excited at a relatively smaller number of successful cases that I would like to share with you later on. This call is basically share with you what we've heard, seen, and fared on this particular regard. Now, first of all, there's no state-level announcement or updates after the interim policy announced by Ministry of Foreign Affairs on March 26. So there isn't a standard guidelines or rule to follow in order to collect your valid China entry visa, like what foreign nationals used to do before the announcement. So in other words, it follows the general case-by-case modus operandi, so which in turn makes this unclear, mysterious, so and open spaces for hearsays or even rumors. But hopefully that our session could somehow demystify the real practice of this new visa application process. Now, we can first revisit the announcement that made by Ministry of Foreign Affairs on March 26. In that announcement, the particular rule that opened doors for returning foreigners reads like, foreign nationals coming to China for necessary economic, trade, scientific, or technological activities, or out of emergency humanitarian needs, may apply for visas at China embassy and consulates. So that's the rule that Noah and I have been working on to bring people back. As Noah just said, we've never seen a successful case on emergency humanitarian needs. So our efforts just all directed to necessary economic and trade and activities. So I would divide the successful case into 3 phases, 1, 2, 3. Now, phase 1 is seeking support from the local authorities, local district government. Phase 2 is an internal communication between the local authorities with the provincial level Foreign Affairs Office, which the department will eventually issue an government sealed invitation letter once they approve your request. And the last phase is the visa application at the consulates. So the first phase, the phase 1, is where applicant can work the most on compared to letter 2. But before I go into details, I would like to revisit some of these old glossary that people might have learned but neglected during the last China entry. The first group of terminologies are local host and invitation letter. All visa applicants should have a local host, regardless of the situation. So in normal scenarios that people will apply for the China entry visa by submitting to the visa section in the Chinese embassy or consulate general an invitation letter issued by your local host. Locals can be your Chinese partner, your clients, your suppliers, a trade organization like CCBC, or even universities and government agencies in China. But however, under this extreme difficult circumstances, the local host invitation letter no longer validates your China entry after the announcement by Foreign Affairs Ministry back on March 26. Instead, the local host would need to apply for a government-sealed invitation letter to succeed a visa application. More specifically, a provincial level government Foreign Affairs Office issued invitation letter. I would like to take the chance to share one example on the screen. I'll see if I can do it here. No, I think you need to close yours. Yeah. Now, this is a standard provincial level government office issued invitation letter that could be used during this new China entry visa application at consulates general around the world. So this, people can see this is issued by the Foreign Affairs Office of Guangdong Province. Where you can have one single invitation letter can support 5 people at most, and stamped and signed. So I think I stopped sharing here, and then just give me 1 second. After this is the invitation letter. Now your local hosts are mostly the foreign wholly owned enterprise, foreign enterprise, the WUFIs, or Chinese partners. It can be any legal entity registered in China. And then more importantly, the people will want to vouch for your return or be held accountable for any consequences or even repercussions if things botched up after entry. So that's kind of prerequisite the people that vouch for your return will have to be held accountable for this particular invitation. Now, in cases that we facilitate, we've seen successful, the local hosts are most likely to be the applicants' China employers, which are the WOFIs invested by multinational corporations. And the applicant hold a critical role in those organizations in China, like the MD in China, vice presidents in China. Now, the second term that you need to get familiar with is your local district government authority. In Chinese, they're called 户管单位 or 归口管理单位. Those are the supervisory units in the government that manage your accounts in China. I would prefer call them account manager, your account manager in China. It depends on your local host business registration. It could be under any district level government branch like Commission of Commerce, 商务委员会, or Department of Economic and Informatization, 经济和信息化委员会, or Science Bureau, 科学技术委员会. So these are our district level government branches. And then China has a myriad of industry development zones, and many companies registered, many foreign companies registered in those large industry zones. The administrative commission of those departments, or those industry parks, can also be your local host. Can also be your account manager or supervisory unit. And it proved that these organizations are very helpful in terms of helping you getting this invitation letter. Now, what you need to do is to get your local host, reach out to the local account manager, the supervisory unit. And by now, many of them have already dedicated specific officials handling such matters. Unlike 2 months ago or 1.5 months ago when Noah and I started to do this, it seems that few people in the organization understand how to handle this matter. But by now, most of these district government or administrative commission have a dedicated person handling those requests. There are a large wave of applicants happened in just last couple of weeks. So after the account manager accept your submission, the local district government will make a decision on whether or not they endorse your return. And in turn, they will escalate this request to the provincial level foreign affairs office for invitation letter. I just shared on screen. So how do we prepare these materials for this particular submission? We've reached out to the foreign affairs office at provincial level and then get a general picture of what documents you need to prepare. They're basically very simple, basic personal information, including a name, your gender, date of birth, nationality, passport number, a copy of your passport, and planned itinerary in China. If you have possible travel to other provinces, you need indicating that in the request. If you need to go to other provinces other than the landing city, you need to get permission from those related government authorities. And then days of intended stay, date of first entry, and visa application city. But beside this basic personal information, there's one particular interesting section that we would like to draw attention to is the purpose of visit. The normal purpose of visits can be described like business, scientific, or tourists or sightseeing. But in this particular section, we've shared or compared notes with the successful applicants. They elaborate this with a lengthy, long document, which includes, just give me 1 second. There's major 2 aspects. The first one is you need to elaborate on your business contribution, your commercial contribution to the district government in terms of the size of your investment, the numbers of your employees, the tax contribution level, as well as the potential technological breakthrough that you can possibly bring to this district of government. And then besides that, a proper introduction of the parent company that invested in this WUFI is also worth mentioning. If you have good projects worldwide and signatorial success that you can be shared or presented to the local district government, that will help. Besides, if you have partners in China, preferably state-owned enterprises, please reach out to them, and then they don't need to send you an invitation, and don't make them feel too nervous about this request. Just get them to have a written confirmation to confirm the relationship, the business relationship that between you and this particular SOE that could surface, that could help your successful application. And then the second aspect is to make sure that you strike on the necessity or the importance of your in-person management instead of remote working from home, to make sure that you weed out the possibility people will reject you because they consider these matters can be handled overseas. So in the letter that you make clear that these things will happen if you are in China. These can be hampered, dampered if you're not here. So how to prepare this purpose of visit? This section is critical to the success of your invitation letter application. Now, this is phase one. Once you have these documents, send it to the local district government. They will have some, probably they will have some back and forth changing, editing before they escalate to the next step, provincial level foreign affairs office. They issue invitation letters, and then the provincial level affair will evaluate your request based on information provided by the district level government, along with your documents. Applicants and us, third parties, hardly have any influence or visibility on this internal process. But we don't know the effective ways to expedite this process. We feel that your local account manager is the best partner that you can depend on in terms of getting this done. Time frame wise, the successful case we have handled, we have witnessed this. It took them 2 weeks or 2 weeks and a half to get this invitation letter issued, since they present the full documents to the local district government. So it's 2 weeks and a half. And then we would recommend to have cadence check-in calls with your account manager to just follow up. Now, the last phase is the invitation letter. With invitation letter in hand, you need to approach the visa section in the Chinese embassies or consulate generals for visa application appointments. I don't want personally to mislead you by giving you uncertified allegation. We're merely sharing things that we heard, witnessed in the course of a member's application. Now, despite the intrinsic authority that the government sealed government invitation letter entail, we ran into completely opposite treatment in different parts of the world where the Chinese visa section resides. In some city, applicants got an invitation to the visa section, and the Chinese diplomatic officials are extremely helpful and considerate in caring about your return flights booking and explaining the landing procedure, quarantine procedure. But on the other hand, applications were blatantly turned down, even with this particular invitation letter. As Noah just said, it's not a key to your return. It's a very important document that it's an indispensable document. It doesn't mean the letter just guarantee your return. The Chinese consulates has discretion, full discretion, to make a decision on their own based on their understanding, interpretation of the announcement made by Ministry of Foreign Affairs back on March 26. So that once you have this visa appointment in some of the cities, visa is issued within a week. The best case I've seen is within 2 days. So you submit your documents, visa appointment held on Wednesday, you get your visa on Friday. This guy is extremely lucky, has a ticket booked on Friday. So all these things turn out to be, if everything worked well, it's not that difficult. And then advices from some other successful cases, like don't lose heart. There are multiple channels at district level government. They made a first call to the district level foreign affairs office and get a rejection, a strict rejection on the phone, but they never give up and tried the administrative commission of their industry park. So multiple channels are viable. Just keep trying. And then, as said earlier, it's complete case by case modus operandi. So just don't give up. There's a chance. So I think I'm good. Noah, if you have any questions, or feel free just to use the chat box to raise your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Edward. That's, it's obviously a lot of information to take in. I do very much encourage any of our members or those of you on the call that would like a little bit more information, and perhaps, the list or the checklist that we've developed internally for what you need to do. There is some degree of track that we've figured out, and there is a process, but what I continue to try to remind folks is that an application does not equal a visa, and that's very important to remember. And as Edward said, there are multiple channels, and there are ways that we have been able to. We've looked at applications. We've actually had applications denied, and then we've found out that there was another angle for this particular family or for this particular case that we could attempt to bring them back through another means. And we're finding that there's no reason to give up. But what I will say is that humanitarian reunification attempt, or that element of the application possibility, has not been successful, obviously, as Edward mentioned, and as I alluded to before. There's something was brought up to me, and it's important to keep in mind that when you think about family reunification in China, we're talking about, for example, I'll draw back to a case study. We have a member here in Shanghai, or who's been outside of China for about 5 months now, 4.5 months, and is desperately trying to return because he has a very young daughter who is not seen since she was about 2 months old. And so his wife and daughter are in Shanghai, and he's unable to return. He's the primary breadwinner for the family. They haven't seen each other in X number of months. There's no severe economic hardship. The family is not struggling financially by any means, but there is that emotional or that humanitarian sort of angle that he attempted to take. Now, from a perspective of the Chinese officials here, thinking back over the last 50, 60 years, if not a little longer in China, it's not uncommon for families to be separated here for months, if not years on end. Obviously, if we go back historically through political struggle and all kinds of other issues, over the years, families were separated for often decades. But even in modern China, in the usual movements and the migrations of many hundreds of millions of families in this country, parents don't see their kids for a full year sometimes. You'll see your kids at Spring Festival, and then you'll go and you'll return to the city to work and leave your children with your parents or your spouse's parents, and you won't see your spouse or your children in person for the full year until you return back to your hometown for Spring Festival once again. That's just simply, so that argument or that that case to be made here is it doesn't quite have the same resonance as it might back home, and that's simply because the reasons I just outlined. It's not uncommon for families to be separated here for months on end, if not longer. So another thing before we move into questions, I did want to share with you is that while we are taking our advocacy or our efforts on a case-by-case basis through that normal track, trying to get you your visas one by one, we are also attempting to get clarity or more clarity and develop more of a fast track, such as other nations or other companies have managed to drive forward. So in the last, I suppose, so a few weeks, 2 weeks ago now, a little over 2 weeks ago, we submitted a letter to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs requesting the establishment of a fast track, not unlike the other nations that we've been engaging with. They are, one of the main differences that we tried to identify in our requests was to include educators in the allowance. Right now, it's been written out a couple of times, and we're not entirely sure why it includes lawyers, because they are, a part of the business fabric here in China. But for some reason or other, lawyers and teachers were not considered to be admitted or admissible under this single entry or normal track visa rule. So anyway, we put this letter together. We included teachers in it. We've been advocating for the reopening of China for residents. That is, those that are actually already living here. I mean, you think about some of the horror stories we've heard of people that are losing their apartments and losing their jobs, and and of course not knowing where to go or what to do, and moving companies off of a WeChat conversation to go into their apartments and pack up their lives. I mean, it's very difficult right now to not have some degree of clarity on when the border might reopen for residents, especially residents, right? I mean, there are those of you, I understand, that are trying to get back here for business purposes. And I can tell you right now that will be the second phase, if there is a second phase. And then tourism is probably, if not at least 12 months away, is what we continue to hear. But we are really actively advocating for residents of China to be able to return, if not at least return, then possibly even come and go. There are all kinds of stories we're also hearing of people that are stuck in China, if you think about it, because if you leave, you can't come back. So I personally haven't left Beijing proper since December 31st, and I'm one of many. But I mean, the reality is that if I were to leave China today, I would be putting a lot at risk. There would be really no way to know when I might be able to get back. So this letter went into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We co-signed it with other chambers in China. We wanted to make sure that we provided a united front. And the letter that went into the ministry also was reviewed by all the heads of mission throughout China. So that includes the consulates in Chongqing, Guangzhou, and Shanghai, as well as the embassy here in Beijing. So we did want to make sure that you were aware of that. We can share this letter with you. I know it's a little bit difficult to read when I'm sharing my screen, but it is available on our website. If you find your way to my blog a couple of days ago, there is a link within that to a hard copy of the letter if you'd like to review it. Again, so myself and Edward are available via email anytime. Please do reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer any more of your questions at a more granular level, and we'll continue to advocate on this topic. I know there was a question from one of you surrounding a startup company that was hoping to return to China and start doing business development. I wish I had better news for you. At this point, it seems that the M visas, business visas, are not really the priority. As much as we had some optimism and hope over the last couple of weeks here in China as domestic travel was reopening, rumors of potentially opening up Hong Kong in July, there was some degree of optimism that was floating around. But now, it can happen at the drop of a hat, where a very isolated issue, or at least seems to be isolated issue at a market, can suddenly have hundreds of cases in a matter of days, and that's not going to affect this process in a positive way. I can tell you that very explicitly. So as much as I wish I could say that we're going to be seeing our business travelers in the very near future, I think that it'll probably be the fall at the earliest, provided that there is no there's no continued outbreak. Now, the other thing to keep in mind also is international management of the virus, right? I mean, China right now has very limited cases. If they start opening up to foreigners outside of their own nationals that are returning, you've got a great deal more risk. And as I was saying earlier, that risk profile is something they're definitely trying to avoid. So unfortunately, I don't think I have good, my gut tells me that it will be a little while, but there was another question around timeline. I think Edward answered that to an extent. The timeline is a little bit more extended than the usual timeline of getting a single entry visa to China. So when you think back to getting your first visa and getting that invitation letter and going to the consulate and getting documents notarized or whatever it was that you had to do, depending on the type of visa that you got, it can take as long as 6 weeks, can take as long as 8 weeks, it can be as long as even 2 weeks, but it totally depends. And it also depends, of course, on availability of flights. So as I was saying earlier, this is a multi-step process. That returning is not just getting this initial entry visa approved. That's only one initial element of the battle. And we are seeing a lot of pushback at consulates around the world. Certain consulates seem to be much more open-minded than others. Singapore, for example, has been very helpful, whereas we've seen consulates in Canada that have been less excited to issue visas. However, I will say that even in the last 24 hours, we did receive correspondence back from the Canadian embassy, or pardon me, the Chinese embassy in Canada, indicating that they would be open to assisting our members directly if there were certain cases that came up. So I think that perhaps there's been a little bit, again, as I said earlier, some trickle down. You know, the mountains are high and the emperor is far away. There's an edict that comes out of Beijing, and before it takes some time before consulates around the world are going to be issuing visas quite, you know, as openly as perhaps the central government wants them to. There's another question here surrounding percentages of people that we know that have gone through the processes that have actually been successful, and how many Canadians that have actually returned. Very good questions. Edward, I'll turn it over to you for the percentage of success. I think that we're probably at about 50% success, maybe a little higher than that. But that doesn't mean, so 50% of success cases, those might have been the easy ones. We've also been working on cases for several weeks that we still haven't had success on, but we don't want to call those failures yet because we're still working on getting them in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. That's exactly what we'd like to respond. Like, we don't count this percentage. It's evolving. Once we receive members' requests or even non-members' requests in terms of getting back to China, we tried different channels. I mean, as I said, multiple channels viable. At district level government or even the provincial level FAOs or phase 3 back home in Canada, we have consulates communication. By the way, all consulates still closed, so we need to go through like emails, finding the right person, and submit the documents. So we don't give up until it's done, or until I think that we don't give up on those applications. There's no end for a case unless they get their visa and get their tickets back. So right now, what Noah said, like 50% is what we've seen, because the number base are smaller, and then we don't give up on those initial rejection. We recommend, we advise them to try different channels, and then a local diligent or smart team is important. You need to have a local admin staff to prepare all this paperwork. And then in terms of the Hong Kong Special Administration Region passport holders, as said, that it's different from other nationals. It's the border between Hong Kong and not the border, the entry to China from Hong Kong is said to be updated in June. So this month, you'll see some updates. It's unlike other nationals. And then the startup companies, again, it depends on the documents you prepare and the communication. Well, the critical step is still the communication between your organization and your local host and the district level government or the administrative committee of industry park, whether or not they would like to vouch for you. Because the philosophy behind this operation is the government needs to hold someone accountable for anything anything negative or anything botched up after your return. So someone, as a foreign entity, foreign company, you can't be held accountable for that. It's only someone in China that can be responsible, can bear the consequences of this particular request. So that person needs to speak to the district government and basically pitch them or make the story just to sell them the great opportunity to having you back in China to boost up the local economy, to enlarge business, to have to present them what's in it for the district government to have you back. If they are, as I said, account manager have KPIs. These things need to work towards favoring their KPI.
Yeah, I agree with you, Edward. That's you hit the nail on the head. We had a case there that we thought we'd had a breakthrough. Actually, this gentleman had been working to get in for several weeks. We found what we thought was to be sort of a backdoor into the into getting him an acceptance or an invitation letter through an entity that he had registered his business through, but unfortunately, when they looked up his company records, they found that he hadn't paid very much tax. So it wasn't that there was no malfeasance necessarily. It was just that this wasn't a very active company. He has multiple companies. He's an active entrepreneur, but there wasn't very much contribution to the local economy through this particular company. And therefore the local official, should this person bring in a case of coronavirus, the official would be brought to task to say, why did you allow this person to come back in? What was, show us the case that you made, or the reasoning behind why you admitted this individual. And if they can't make that case from an economic perspective, then they have effectively skirted the rules. And it's effectively a corrupt decision, right, through Guanxi or whatever it is. The question surrounding how many Canadians have returned, I don't even begin to want to hazard a guess. I mean, I would probably say, in fact, I would almost certainly say it's likely less than 100. There are probably several Canadian passport holders that have managed to return without using organizations like CCBC because they probably have relationships back home. There may be Canadian passport holders, for example, individuals of Chinese descent that have been living in Canada that may or may not have been able to get back in through some channel that we didn't have to help them along with. But the likelihood of a Canadian without those types of, you have to go through the normal channels and get a visa issued. You'll notice also on the letter that Edward shared earlier when he shared his screen, there was a 90-day visa that was issued for those three individuals. That's long. We've seen 30 and 60 day as well. So keeping in mind that if you are a residence permit holder, and you want to re-enter China, what you are doing is you are sacrificing or canceling all of your existing paperwork. So if you are even the chief representative on a company, or if you are on a 3-year residence permit, for example, and you're coming back into China on this single entry, you can only have one valid visa to China at a time. So you are actually going to have to cancel your 3-year residence permit. And in those 30 days when you arrive back in China, you have to begin that process again to get all of that paperwork redone. And there is a fair amount of administrative burden to that. I would advise our business people and stakeholders in the chat right now to keep that in mind, because there can be pitfalls surrounding that. Age, there's all kinds of discriminatory ways that a residence permit might not be approved despite it having been approved before. We use that same argument, however, to say this is why you should allow Canadians back into the country if they have residence permits. We've gone through a mountain of paperwork. We've been approved to live in China. By any degree of imagination, this should be effectively the same as almost being like a permanent residence holder. Or, obviously your life, your your income and your home is here, and so you should be allowed to return. So there are kind of two sides to every coin. We will keep we'll be keeping Hong Kong very close, David, on our radar. I know that many of us would be eager to go to Hong Kong and be able to come back into China, but apparently there are going to be updates to that border or that transition point in early July, is what we've been hearing. To answer Carrie's question, I think Edward and I will tackle that together, but Chinese nationals to Canada, that'll be an interesting one. I think that's more of a decision on the part of the Canadian government, because they're obviously a lot more involved in that. But I'm reluctant to say that many Chinese nationals are trying to leave China right now. In fact, it sounds as though, well, what we're hearing, there are tens of thousands, as I said, 100,000 Canadians alone, or Canadian Chinese alone, that are trying to get back to China, which is why it's so difficult to get a seat on a flight. I know that probably doesn't exactly answer your question. Maybe, Edward, you might want to chime in there.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't see the question in the chat box. I think the question is meant to you. But I would like to just add on the previous comment about the days of stay. We reached out to the Shanghai Foreign Affairs Office to confirm the invitation letter and the visa, the type of visa, the days of granted entry. The max of your days of stay here in China is 180 days on this particular new visa. However, they recommend you to immediately, after landing, immediately go to the police office, the entry and exit bureau of the public securities department, to change it to working visa, and then continue on applying for a new resident permit before this single entry visa expire. And then again, we reach out to the relevant department in the Public Securities Bureau, and we get the confirmation. As long as you handle your application properly, as Noah said, a mountain of documents, redo it again, then things will, they will approve those residence permit. But if you face a huge amount of work and just to get your new resident permit after this, the single entry visa, yes, all your previous travel documents or approval or visas or permits have to be canceled if you want to apply for this new visa to China. And then the last case, the case that Noah just said, is a flight, one of our member, flight from Vancouver to Sichuan. There are only 5 flights between the two countries, the destination, so it's only a handful of destinations they can choose. Vancouver to Sichuan, and straight nucleic acid test. Government arranged hotel in Sichuan, in Chengdu, is 450 per day, including 3 meals, locked in the room, no permits outside of the room. The internet is still okay. It's the ticket itself is 57,000 renminbi. It's over 11,000 Canadian. It's not a market price. You don't get it from the market. It's basically through certain level of guanxi, the people that have strong tie with the Sichuan airline to be able to get one ticket, or you wait for the cancellation. The chance of getting tickets back in July is very, very slim.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately, obviously, extremely expensive, as we were saying earlier. It's you know, it's onerous for even a wealthy executive to get on one of these flights, much less a teacher or a family or anything like that. So keep that in mind. Again, I hope that it's not all doom and gloom for everybody here. We've got a couple more questions, and we'll stay on for another couple of minutes. I see there's a question about internal applications. Anything that's going on inside China domestically at this point should not be affected. If you're applying for permanent residency, if you're applying for a new residence permit because you've managed to get back in, if you're trying to get a visa extended, all those types of things, even when the office is closed, it shouldn't be a problem here in China. They've been extending existing visas automatically because of the challenges they're having surrounding office closures, but they are they have been relatively amenable and understanding on that administrative side. David Fung raises an interesting point. Using Canadian employees in Hong Kong that have HK passports to work on projects in China, likely very strong potential that the Hong Kong residents or Hong Kong passport holder is going to be admitted to China long before another nationality. So it could work very well if you can track down a Canadian working in Hong Kong with a Hong Kong passport, if that's what you're looking for. But an interesting strategy nonetheless. Now, ultimately, we're really kind of focused in on getting Canadians that are in Canada back, and of course Canadians that are stuck in other countries, because we realize that, and I put this in our letter as well, many of the Canadians that we've been communicating with are not actually in Canada. When they left China, they stayed regional. So many of them went to Singapore, or they went to Japan, or they went to Korea, or even several of our members are in Europe right now. And everybody's just been kind of playing the waiting game. So we're obviously going to bat for Canadian passport holders, but ultimately, as we said earlier, one of the challenges that you have to maintain or be aware of is that the consulate in your jurisdiction where you need to get that visa issued is going to ultimately hold some degree of sway. We have been able to communicate directly with the consulates in Canada, and they have been relatively they've been working with us, but it sometimes takes some time, several emails in fact, before they have accepted that. The first time that we communicated with the consulate that I was mentioning earlier in Canada, they wrote us an email back sort of saying, like, aren't you aware that we aren't giving visas out right now? And we sort of said, well, actually, believe it or not, we are aware. We haven't been completely under a rock the past several months, but this is one of those special normal track single entry visas that has a special invitation letter attached to it. And it was the first one that they had seen. They hadn't actually seen one of these applications as yet at the time. So we were kind of everybody was being educated at the same time on this issue, right? So we were all learning together, and we had to kind of fight tooth and nail to get them to see that application for what it was. And again, sadly, that application was ultimately accepted. The new visas are in the passports. They have 90-day, these particular visas have 90-day validity, but being that it's June 16th and they aren't able to fly before September, they're not even sure that those visas will still be valid by the time they are able to get a flight. So there's all kinds of potholes, pardon me, that you have to avoid. So keeping that in mind, and a final recommendation from my side, if any of you are listening in from China, and Beijing in particular, I would recommend that for the next few days, avoid unnecessary travel, especially out of Beijing. But moreover, if you are in China, I would suggest that you do not leave China. It's probably going to be very, very difficult for you to get back in. And as you can see from this process, it's probably going to be harder for those that leave, because there's going to be, some degree of question marks surrounding why you left, right? And if you are so essential, if China is so essential to you in your life, why did you leave in the first place? So that's something to keep in mind as well. Edward, any final, David, I see you have a quick question there. Yes, absolutely. We do have sufficient resources in country, and that's one of the services that we've been offering our members is to act as a proxy, where we are going, unfortunately domestic travel might be hindered slightly over the next few days, but we'll see. But we've been actually going to our members' sites, to their factories, to their projects, and taking photos, videos, interviewing some of their staff, and ensuring that everything is going according to plan, and offering that unbiased third-party proxy to help companies feel a little bit more engaged, give them some peace of mind. So if any of you are considering how you're going to continue to manage your company while you're outside of China, while you're stuck outside of China, we'd be very happy to work with you as a proxy and go and visit your sites and do some investigations for you at your obviously there's cost involved in that, but we'd be happy to discuss. So any final thoughts, Edward, before we turn everyone loose for the night?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much done. I think our office here in China are open to those requests. If you have anything like particularly you would like to share with us offline, feel free just to send an email or send an email. We'll take it from there. We were just trying to use our network just to facilitate your successful return.
Yeah. Well said, Edward. Well, so I'll thank everybody. We'll call it an hour there. We very much appreciate you coming on tonight or this morning, wherever you are in the world. Obviously, those of you that have dialed in today, or those that have challenges, or that are concerned about colleagues, family members, employees, etc., that are trying to get back. We are very much here in China to assist, to help shepherd your application however possible, and we hope that we can see you back here in the mainland as soon as possible. Till then, stay safe, stay sane, and we'll be here for you for whatever you need. Bye for now.